No, but, a lot of people ask me about that and say, what's the secret of Mrs. Brown? And I don't know if there is any secret about Mrs. Brown. She's a bitch. I mean, she's an old cow. I also think that she's at an age where she doesn't care what she says.
Imagine this. British sitcom without Mrs. Brown's boys. Hard, eh? Love it or hate it, this show burst onto the scene back in 2011 and became a phenomenon. With its rude gags, outrageous characters, it was odd, loud, messy, and unremittingly old-fashioned. Various main cast members departed throughout the years, some stealthily, some amid furor. Why did they leave one of the UK and Ireland's most watched programs? Personal differences? Creative differences? Something more? Let's take a closer look at the actual reasons these actors left Mrs. Brown's Boys and how it changed the program forever. History of Mrs. Brown's Boys before it rose to become one of the BBC's most popular comedies. Mrs. Brown's Boys had a humble beginning away from the limelight of television studios. Indeed, the tale begins on Ireland's lowly stages in the early 1990s. Brendan O'Carroll at the time was a struggling writer and stand-up comedian with an idea. As inspired by the Irish matriarchs he grew up surrounded by, he wrote a character who would alter his destiny, Agnes Brown. A foul-mouthed, no-nonsense Dublin mammy with a heart of gold. Agnes was chaos and compassion all rolled into one. O'Carroll first brought her to life in his radio play and again in his self-published novel The Mammy, which set the stage for what quickly became a theatrical phenomenon. The role of Agnes Brown was never intended to be played by Brendan himself, at least not initially. But when the actress originally cast for the role didn't show up for a live performance of one of his early plays, Brendan did what any natural-born performer would do. He donned a dress, a wig, and took on the role himself. And in an instant, Mrs. Brown was created, not on paper, but on stage. The crowds reacted instantly. There was something unvarnished, unruly, and genuine about this Irish mammy who shattered the fourth wall through verbal insults with affection and somehow managed to hold her family together by force of will alone. As the play gained momentum, Brendan started touring it up and down the country and eventually across the seas. These productions were raw and unorthodox by any standards. Indeed, part of the charm of it was the disorder. Misline cues were trimmed. Scripted moments gave way to remarks addressed to members of the audience, and even, out-of-role, direct address. It wasn't one of those highbrow confrontations. It refused to be, but it was this and absolutely side-splitting. The plays gained a cult following among working-class Irish and British viewers who did get some variation of their own families represented on stage, if only louder, dirtier, and generally with a beer and an oath. It wasn't until 2011, nearly 20 years since its initial appearance on stage, that Mrs. Brown's Boys debuted on screen. The UK's BBC One did gamble on O'Carroll's writing low-budget sitcom adaptation. However, a great deal of the format still operated on stage, conventions live audiences, on-camera production fluffs, and visible and direct-to-camera asides. Critics were not kind. They had a field day with the show when it came to fans of what it represented as a dated sense of humor, overdoing innuendo, and allegedly cheap laughter. Brendan O'Carroll not only created a character, but he constructed the cast based on his real-life friends and family. His wife Jennifer Gibney appeared as Kathy, Agnes's daughter. His son Danny appeared as Dermot, while his daughter Fiona appeared as Maria. Even his sister, Eilish O'Carroll, appeared as Winnie McGugan, the friendly next-door neighbor. All that provided the series with an undeniable chemistry, a warmth that even the most ardent critic couldn't help but agree upon, but also the very reality of that proximity brought inevitable issues every so often. With relationships evolving through the years, there would be the occasional tensions off-camera. The program and the franchise became more inextricably linked than ever. The live tour went on with sold-out arenas in the UK and Australia. Christmas specials were TV must-haves, breaking viewing records annually. There were books, DVDs, merchandise, and even Mrs. Brown's Boys the movie, a feature film in 2014 that was panned by critics but still succeeded in Ireland and Britain at the box office. Brendan O'Carroll had not just created a character. He had constructed a comedy dynasty. But success led to tension. Cast members who had been with the show for years started to leave, some due to personal issues, others due to more professional disagreements. And the fans took notice. But even while Mrs. Brown's Boys is certainly not without its shortcomings, it is nevertheless a cultural shovelful in the way of British and Irish television. Love it or loathe it, there is no escaping the effect it's had. In an age of high-concept sitcoms and prestige TV, Mrs. Brown's Boys is unique, unapologetically unrefined, stubbornly old-fashioned, and unapologetically itself. The tale of success is one of perseverance, dedication, and the strength of taking a risk, even if that risk involved a cardigan-clad man shouting at his children in a mock living room. And for Brendan O'Carroll, what was initially a late substitution on stage became one of the longest-running and most successful comedy creations of an era. But as the show itself got into its stride in front of the cameras, change was already afoot behind them, beginning with someone very close to Brendan O'Carroll. Fiona O'Carroll, Maria Brown. The first of the big exits to cause waves among the Mrs. Brown's Boys fanbase was that of Fiona O'Carroll, who starred as Maria Brown, the lovely but forceful daughter-in-law of Agnes and the long-suffering wife of Dermot. Fiona was more than just another member of the cast. She was Brendan O'Carroll's actual daughter and had been part of the Mrs. Brown world right from the start. From initial stage productions in the 1990s to the BBC mainstream version, Fiona had played a key role in developing Maria into one of the show's most down-to-earth and endearing characters. Therefore, when it was announced in 2022 that she would not be returning to the cast for the live stage tour, fans were amazed. In order to comprehend the importance of her death, you must look back at how Fiona was embedded in the DNA of the show. Mrs. Brown's Boys was never a generic sitcom. It was a household name. Fiona was brought up with the show, literally. She was there before the TV lights, before the world tours, before the fame. She was Maria when the dialogue was botched on stage and the gags came with a wink and a nudge. Through the years, Fiona's character progressed from being a reserved newcomer to the Brown family circus to being a central pillar, the voice of reason in a sea of outrageous stunts, the calm in the midst of chaos. Speaking freely, Fiona, quite openly and unexpectedly, disarmingly replied to the question of why she was leaving. Having been part of bringing Maria to life for more than 10 years, she was at a personal crossroads. I felt like I was living someone else's story, she said. I needed to write my own, not merely departing around a character, but rather closer to saying yes to herself. After all, the woman was a mother of middle age and well-nigh discovered life beyond Brown's family iron cage. There was no knee-jerk or snap reaction. It was reflective, discussing a moment with her children, a place to improve upon, and concluding she required space from that which did not seem to be hers anymore, or with that immediate perception about it. Of course, conjecture ran. Audiences were curious if anything else was occurring. Was there drama behind the scenes? Was there family angst simmering beneath the surface? It isn't easy, after all, shutting down a show where your dad is the executive. But Fiona had no time for speculation. Interview after interview, she insisted that there was no fallout, no fight, and no bad feelings. She and her father, Brendan, were closer than ever. Brendan has also been proud of the choice and has publicly expressed his support. She's my daughter first, not just Maria, he informed the media, and I respect her for understanding what she requires. It truly did not make her absence less felt. Maria Brown was not the flashiest of characters on the show, no. Salting littered with trash, wigs, hoots hurled, and falls, she was integral. To Dermot, the emotional anchor. To Agnes, the balance beam of madness. And, in large part, the audience's surrogate. Maria was a real person who responded like a typical human being amidst cartoonish mayhem. Without it, Mrs. Brown's Boys was just a bit more out of control and a bit less reality-checked. While other actors took up the slack, fans could sense the difference. Fiona's exit also caused a disconnect in the existing dynamics of the show. Ever since, the key to Mrs. Brown's Boys' strength has been the tight-knit cast, a tangled web of family and very long-standing friends. But over the years, the originally stubborn center started to shift. Fiona leaving was one of the early indications that change would find its way into even a tradition and loyalty-based family show. Her decision sparked conversations regarding self-care, burnout, and the need to take a break even from something that is cherished not when it's no longer good for your soul. Since leaving the show, Fiona has virtually retreated from the limelight. She opted to spend time with relatives, and although she's not ruling out the thought of resuming her acting career, her focus is elsewhere. Although she occasionally provides the occasional interview or steps onto the stage for chats, she has never intimated that she regrets departing. Far from it. She appears more rooted than ever before and has demonstrated that quitting is occasionally not the end of a tale, but the beginning of an entirely new one. Mrs. Brown's Boys viewers won't recognize her as Maria Brown any longer. However, there's no denying Fiona O'Carroll's place in the series. Rory Cowan this one stung. When Rory Cowan, who portrayed the perpetually glamorous and flamboyant Rory Brown, left Mrs. Brown's Boys in 2017, his fans were shocked. He wasn't merely another actor. He was the essence of the show. With his energy, his outrageous fashion, and his quick wit, Rory added a sort of humor to the show that didn't come along very often. His character's steady zapping of Agnes, his outlandish facial antics, and the chemistry between him and Brendan O'Carroll made him an immediate fan favorite. To many, Rory was Mrs. Brown's son, and losing him was like losing part of the show's heart. Rory had been part of the Brown family long before the TV cameras ever arrived. Actually, he began as Brendan O'Carroll's publicist, assisting in promoting the early stage shows throughout Ireland and the UK. Later, when the actor needed to be cast for Agnes's son Rory, Brendan chose him for the role. It was only temporary, until they could find someone else, though. But Rory was a natural. With his signature bleached locks, his laugh that was infectious as it was charming, and his distinctive presence, he inhabited the character with a vitality no one else could match. It wasn't long before audiences were captivated by him, and Rory became an indispensable member of the cast. So when he left the live stage tour in 2017, the question on everyone's lips was, why? What would compel someone so integral, and it seemed so content, to leave behind a show so popular and evidently thriving? It was personal, emotional, and most importantly, very human. In subsequent interviews, Rory told that the reason had nothing to do with disagreements, artistic differences, or even Brendan. It all had to do with his mother. Rory had taken care of his elderly mom for more than a decade through the grueling touring and filming schedule imposed